Thank you for joining us for our 11th episode of HeLPiNG Questions. I'm Dr. Elisa Luque, HeLPiNG Questions host. In today's episode, we'll have the opportunity to ask Dr. Ethan Kutlu our 11th HeLPiNG question. Dr. Ethan Kutlu is a postdoctoral researcher and incoming assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics and the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences at the University of Iowa, in Iowa City, the United States. Ethan's research is groundbreaking and absolutely fascinating, and focuses on better understanding the crossroads of language, cognition, and the environment, using a variety of different research tools from psychology, neuroscience, or even network science. For example, in his research, Ethan explores how speech perception is shaped by a variety of different individual environmental factors, such as one's experience and attitudes toward linguistic diversity, the configuration of your social network, or your own identity. Please take a seat and stay with us as we get to hear more from Ethan about how bilingual identities are shaped by the different cultural, historical, and sociopolitical biases we're constantly surrounded by in the world we live in. Welcome, Ethan, to the 11th episode of HeLPiNG Questions. We're so excited to have you as our guest and to be able to discover together fascinating scientific facts about bilingualism. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. It's a great privilege.
It is really our privilege. And Ethan, considering the groundbreaking contributions you've made to help us better understand bilingualism and the bilingual experience, specifically something fascinating and groundbreaking about your research is that how you've helped us understand how both individual and societal perceptions about bilingualism are influenced by many different factors, such as attitudes towards linguistic diversity, for example. So that's why we really couldn't think of a better person than you to ask our 11th HeLPiNG question. Should we jump right in?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Then, Ethan, based on your experience, knowledge, and expertise, how would you say that bilingual identities are shaped by the different cultural, historical, and sociopolitical biases and ideologies we're constantly surrounded by the world we live in?
Thank you so much for that wonderful question. And to answer that, I will actually take you and the audience all the way back to language ideologies, because I think that is where it all starts. And I will walk you through how they spread through our space, social space, and it comes to being a bilingual. So just to give a quick definition of what language ideologies are, we always use this terminology, but it's always good to go back and see how it, like, where it's driven from, right? Like what was the starting point? And oftentimes we actually cannot pinpoint starting points for language ideologies. These are sets of beliefs that at some point some people start talking about them, they start using these terminology or descriptions, and then over time they become common sense. So oftentimes we don't even judge or consider why we're saying certain things about certain people, certain language users. We just use those descriptions because we feel like they're just a common sense. So I can walk out and hear someone's accent and I can say, oh, that person's accent is X way, or oh, that person presents as Y person and their accent sounds really heavy. And those are, again, they don't have any roots. They just come from our understanding of just institutionalized and naturalized ideas of how language should be and who gets to speak the standard language. And from those, we create that standard language by just looking up to some examples in the society. So oftentimes, these are communicated through media outlets that we get to examine politicians or people presenting news, and we kind of pretend that their language is the standard, so we should sound like them. And any deviation outside of that range is considered as broken, something that needs to be fixed, not nice, not academic, not scientific. And again, those are also the common sense knowledge that we use because that's what the information that we gather since we come to this world. So some of these ideologies, of course, they also don't stay in their ideological space. They also move away from that and start essentializing social categories. I already briefly mentioned about this, but if we see a person and if we, let's say that they're presenting as a non-white person, we can take that information and automatically judge that person's all speech patterns as not standard. And that, again, it just not even without hearing their voice, or their sign, we just make that assumption that they should sound different because they look different. So those are the things that start the conversation about being bilingual. Because while we know that the majority of the world's population is bilingual, bilingual identity is something very salient to most of the population as well. And oftentimes, this is also marked with migration, looking different than the location, like the many people that live in that location, sounding slightly different, sounding maybe way more different than other people. And when you gather those information, oftentimes bilinguals are exposed to these ideologies of being the outsider or bringing something that is violating the pure language. And that's what we call as a purity ideology, is that in a given space, language has to be pure, perfect, standard. And whenever you have incomers or migrants coming in, that just introduces change, new patterns of language, another language, or maybe another dialect or accent. And oftentimes people are not open to those new information. So in my research, I'm gonna give examples of accents first, and then I will take you to a different journey than outside of accents. So what we have been doing is that, okay, well, we can take accents, and we all have our unique accents. They're just accumulation of our linguistic history, and we should all be proud of our accents. But when it comes to the real world interactions, we actually see the opposite, that some people do everything to mask their accent or to get rid of their accent because they feel threatened in the society. So what we did was we used those purity ideologies that we observe in most of the world, around the world, and we kept same recordings of speech of American English, and we paired it with either white face or a South Asian face. And even American English, that was the familiar accent for our participants, became accented, heavily accented, when we presented with South Asian faces. So at that level, we start arguing that, well, it's not just the way that we sound or the way that we use language. It's actually an accumulation of those essentialist ideologies. And most of the times, language ideologies, actually, they're not related to language at all. They're related to some form of uncomfort or like discomfort with the society having different diverse components. And for a very long time, of course, through politics or policymaking, we've been observing singular ideologies of how the society should be structured. And oftentimes those individuals who are responsible for those also have some sort of um, they benefit from that, right? By masking diversity, by keeping everything standard, mono and hetero, we just fit into those norms because it's just easier to play with that space than keeping everything too diverse. So from those, we can see that, well, our authentic accents, something that we really have no control over because we cannot change the language that surrounds us. They're being judged negatively because of these ideologies. But when we bring it to bilingualism, this has huge consequences because in the United States, the majority of the studies that we conducted, what we're seeing is this two different ways of perception of speaking Spanish. While a white monolingual English speaker can learn Spanish as a second language at school, and benefit from that by saying that, oh, I took some Spanish classes and that actually gave me more client portfolio, the different client portfolio. I'm making more money because I'm speaking Spanish. On the other hand, we see individuals who speak Spanish at home who are being threatened by people, their neighbors, saying that, oh, I'm going to call the police because you're not teaching your child English. And to be American, you have to just speak English. Or speaking Spanish is the broken version of English. And that, a lot of people were taken out of school, taken out of their classes because they spoke accidentally some Spanish, or maybe their Spanish accent came out. And when you see these two sides of the same coin, you start questioning then whose language we're benefiting from when we're talking about bilingualism. Because in both situations, we're talking about some sort of bilingualism, either heritage bilingualism or second language acquisition. But one part is benefiting from acquiring that other language, whereas the other one literally trying to mask it and hide it in the society just so that they can live in a safe space. So again, this is going to take us all the way back to language ideologies, because if we're doing the cognitive research on both of these bilinguals, we will see the similar structures or maybe different structures, but there should be some cognitive differences associated with both parties. But at the societal level, one is getting high stigma and the other one is getting high benefit from speaking Spanish. So the perception of being a bilingual, it highly depends on these language ideologies that are essentialized and based on oftentimes the hetero white monolingual in the English speaking community speaking with the standard accent or standard dialect, and anything outside of that is always perceived as broken, negative, something that needs to be fixed, not pure. I mean, these are the words that we gathered from our text, online text analysis. These are not adjectives that I'm using. These are adjectives that people actually use to describe what it means to speak in a bilingual mode in the United States. So, yeah.
Wow. Um, I mean, so much to reflect on, no? So we are
Yeah.
like subjected to all these different like biases and cultural, historical, social, political biases and culturally as well. And as you said, like ideologies and monolithic, monolingual, like
Yeah.
normative ideologies and the way in which we perceive the world and ourselves really shaped by them. So you through your research, you've also like helped us like shed light on these underlying things that sometimes are not so evident, right? Even though, of course, we all live in these societies and we have to also overcome these specific biases as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
And you're such an amazing social justice advocate, and we really want to also highlight these issues, but then on the other hand also since we have you here and we have the opportunity of having you here, I was wondering if, based on your experience and on all the work you've conducted, whether you would have any recommendations for us as to kind of how can we at the individual but also societal level, like try to like overcome, and these ideologies and these biases that we have on a daily basis, so then we can empower and support like bilingual individuals and communities across the world. So I was wondering if we could pick your brain a bit in trying to
Yeah.
like make this world a better place, and also more embracing the inherent diversity that
Yeah.
we all have.
Yeah, yeah, that's a excellent question, and I probably think about it daily. And I probably won't have a quick answer to that, but so at the individual level, it starts with learning more and understanding that language is not only happening to us, it's happening to everybody in different forms and shapes, right? It's almost like having your favorite food, right? You might enjoy eating avocados, right? And the other person might not enjoy that. Just knowing that there is that diversity, that someone else might not be doing the same thing or someone else might not be enjoying the same thing. It starts from as simple as that, just understanding the diversity at that level. With language use, oftentimes through education, we also heighten the ideologies, because when we enter classrooms, we're basically telling our children, okay, leave everything that you learn at home. Here is how you should speak. Here's how you should sound. And there, of course, I do not have education, psychology background or anything related to curriculum creation, but what happens oftentimes is that those are also like that curriculum, or those curricula also created based on someone else's ideologies about how language should sound like. So we should collectively, not at the individual level, but societal level, researcher level, community level, we should all basically inform each other, saying that other types of language, accents, dialects exist. The best way of doing this for a very long time was exposure. right? Bringing people who speak different than us, or making sure that their voices are also amplified, that we give space to individuals who may not be following standard norms when they're speaking. But I oftentimes see also the downside of doing that. If we're not prepared enough, or if we don't have a strong allyship in our community, doing that also has its own harms, because then we are putting those individuals at risk of opening themselves. We're almost treating them as, I don't know anything about diversity of languages, teach me, right? And that's a lot of load on those individuals who are also struggling with all these ideologies that surround them. So as individuals, as researchers, we also need to benefit from allyship and understand what that means, right? Does that mean that I need to be quiet in times that so that my colleagues will have their own voice? Yes. But do I need to step up if someone else is, crossing that border? Yes. Right. So that allyship training also requires a lot of diversity in your network, right? Because without that, you also don't know when to do what. um in like moving forward, I think there is this understanding of now we're not following some of the norms that I discussed before very like rigidly, especially the new generation, especially Gen Z. Their use of social media, their use of language use is a little bit expanding outside of those norms. But there's also, again, the big criticism of Gen Z breaking the rules and doing everything bad, and which we always see in all generational differences, right? So I think we need to respect that the language is going to change no matter what we do. Even though we live in the most controlled society, language is going to change at some point, at some time. And finally, I think the biggest step that we can take is next time when we look at someone and we start making assumptions about them, whether it's about their language, their age, gender identity, their job, socioeconomic status, we should stop and think for a second and just put a mirror in front of us and think, if that person will be saying these things about me, what would that make me feel like? How would I sit with that information? And I think when we start switching our understanding of, oh, if this is targeted at me, that would really hurt me, then I think we start slowing down and stop saying those harmful, essentialized, or stop using those essentialized categories for other people. So I really invite people to do that.
Well, thank you, Ethan. This was amazing and so
Thank you.
insightful. And I think it's, this call for empathy and self-reflection that I think
Yeah,
definitely help us all, embrace
exactly.
diversity in our world, and I think make
Mhm.
this world a much better place. So we wanted to, of course, thank you so much to
Thank you
help
so
us
much.
better understand, how bilingual identities are shaped by all these different, like, cultural, historical, and social political ideologies.
Yeah.
And thank you
Mhm.
so much also by giving us specific tips on how we can empower bilingual communities and encourage the world to embrace the beauty in linguistic diversity. So it was an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a big privilege to be able to share my ideas with you, Alicia, and really appreciate your time and for all of us doing this. This is actually, I forgot to mention it, but just start watching HeLPiNG videos, right? That's all it takes, because when you learn about it, then you can start think about it more in detail. So yeah, I really appreciate your efforts of doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you, Ethan, so much.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.
We really hope you enjoyed our 11th helping question, and that Ethan's fascinating scientific insight and professional experience helped you to learn some new things about how bilingual identities are shaped by the different cultural, historical, and socio-political biases we're constantly surrounded by in the world we live in. Stay tuned for our next episode coming to you in September, where we'll get to ask Professor Viorica Marian, Ralph and Jean Sunding, endowed professor of communication sciences and disorders at Northwestern University in Evanston, in the United States, our 12th helping question. How do the languages we use to think, speak, and live transform our minds? We look forward to seeing you all back here in September. Also, do not forget to subscribe and to share with us your thoughts, feedback, and comments on any of our social media channels. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you back here for our next Helping Questions episode. Bye bye.